So, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to CommsCamp. So this is part 5, and today what we're going to be talking about is capacity. Now, there's lots of different ways that we can cut capacity. So what we're going to do today is really focus on a couple of key things. We're going to talk about the organisation. So what capacity do you have within your organisation to be able to deliver the communications that your organisation wants and deserves. But we're also going to spend quite a bit of today's call talking about personal capacity. So both how do we identify our own purpose in a team and think about our own skills and training and CPD, and also how do we lead a team and what's important when leading teams. And leading teams is optional, so we'll talk about that as well. I think there's been a big shift recently in the way that people progress in their career, and not everybody wants to be the leader, not everybody wants to lead the team, and there are so many opportunities these days also to specialise. So we'll touch on that a little bit later on as well. So starting off with our capability review, which we go back to each week, the kind of 5 key areas that we're looking at within capability is whether you have the correct blend of resources and human resources, really. So whether that's in-house, whether it's outsourced, or whether it's a hybrid model where you bring in extra capacity where you need it, and maybe for campaigns, or maybe you outsource your business as usual. Lots of different ways to do this. We'll talk very briefly about budget. I feel like budget, we could probably have an entire session on just alone. So we're just going to skim over budget today and just talk about a few key points there. And we're also going to talk about the structure of a communications team and accountability. We're going to skip over communication champions today because I feel like we can come back to that in one of the other sessions. And we're going to talk about training and skills. So we'll start with the budgets because that's quite straightforward, and we're just gonna skip through it really. But the first point we'd like to share is the concept of COCA, which is the cost of customer acquisition, or sometimes it's called CAC, which is customer acquisition cost. Now, often when people are maybe working in-house, also in agencies as well, it can be difficult to secure a clear budget. So one of the number one starting points that we would recommend if you're in a commercial organisation, and also if you're working in something that's third sector or public sector, there's also ways that you can cut this as well for those. But starting with a commercial organisation, if you're sales driven and you're looking at your marketing and your communication spend, a really good starting point is to work out what budget can you allocate to the acquisition of one customer. So thinking about the value of that customer, what's your cost of sales? What's the cost of the marketing activity as well? And then if you divide that by the number of customers that you're going to acquire, that's going to give you your customer acquisition cost. So to give you a really simple example of this, let's say you spend £10 on Facebook advertising. Now we're taking out of here sort of overhead costs, so we're not thinking about the time it took you to do it at the moment, although obviously if you're going to be smart you should be including some of those things. So at this stage we're really just thinking about the cost of the activity. You spend £10 on Facebook advertising and you secure 10 new clients or customers. That makes your cost of customer acquisition £1 per customer. So nice and simple. 10 customers, £10, £1 per customer. Really simple maths. What you can then do though is look at the lifetime value of that customer. And obviously the lifetime value of the customer must be a very minimum of £1, because if the lifetime value profit, that is as well, so if the profit on that customer is £1 over their lifetime, then you've broken even. If it's £2, then you've got an ROI of 2 to 1. So for every £1 that you spend on marketing activity, you're getting £2 back. And that's quite appealing. But if you can start moving up the scale and get really targeted advertising and targeted communication campaigns, then if you can start to have returns of much higher numbers, and it does differ depending on the industry, that's really valuable. And I mentioned this isn't just for your sort of sales focused organizations. So if you are a charity, you could think about the support that you provide people and how do you reach them with that support. And then you could start to think about how do you acquire those service users and what budget do you have allocated. So different ways you could cut this. If you have £10,000 of marketing spend and you have a target of reaching 1,000 people with your services, then in theory, if you work backwards, that would give you £10 to spend to reach each client or each service user. So lots of maths you can do here, and we could spend days on budgets. So we're just touching on it today. So really giving you those kind of top 3 tips. So the first is think about the customer acquisition cost. The next one is obviously maintain your budget well. We actually just still use spreadsheets. There is loads of software out there, but I think depending on, no matter how complex, even if you've got really quite difficult budgets with a lot of detail and a lot of spend, even into the, multi-millions, I really feel like a spreadsheet still does the job. However, I'm learning here as well. So if you've got some great software, I'd love to hear about that, whether that's via email or on the Facebook group. So we certainly use spreadsheets, and we think that they are very adaptable and they let you manage that budget in detail. The other thing I would say is a lot of people I talk to in communications will say, look, I'm a big picture, I'm a visionary, I'm a creative, I'm not about the numbers. And, that's all very well. We can't be great at everything. So if numbers aren't your strong point, I would go and make friends in the accounts team and try and get somebody that's got your back that can maybe help you with some of this. However, if you don't understand the numbers, then you're always going to struggle to not only secure the budgets that you need to be able to deliver what you want to do, but also to report back and demonstrate the value, and to check in midway and make sure that wherever your budget's going, it's delivering a return. So 3 top tips really there to get started on budgets. But happy to take more in the Facebook chat as well, and come back to people as well with any specific questions you might have about budget. I'm sure lots of people have seen this before, and we're not having a dig at clients here. I think as well, a lot of in-house teams, you have internal clients too. So this isn't only the fact that as an agency, we sometimes receive briefs that maybe don't match the budget available, but I'm sure as an in-house team, you have that exact same challenge. So we're going to move on to talk about team and how your organization kind of works. So in the kind of older days, I think everybody's really familiar with this hierarchical form of a team. So if you think about the team that you're in and think about the structure, is it hierarchical? Is there a CEO and then heads of departments and then heads of teams and then team leaders and then maybe sort of specialists in topics? Maybe they've got assistants, maybe they've got PAs, they've got admins. It's really hierarchical, and decisions get made at the top, they get passed all the way down the chain. And it's really quite a highly structured organization. A common place you would find this, as well as lots of big organizations, is maybe in the army. So they've got these really clear job titles and everybody reports into the next level up. You've then got underneath that this concept of a slightly flatter organization. So what you'll see there is there's just a few less layers. So it's probably got a bit less middle management and maybe a few more doers, and people probably feel a little bit more empowered to make a decision and decide, what they can do. Over here, so you've got this flat organization. So it's completely flat. people have a real kind of a choice over what direction thing goes in, and how people work, and how the organization operates. As you will know, the hierarchical organization is in some ways easier to manage. The flat organization needs a really good organizational culture to be able to allow that flatness to also ensure that things get done. And I think increasingly businesses are, and all kinds of organizations are embracing this new flatter structure. So they're thinking about, particularly with purpose-led organizations, thinking about how can people be empowered to make decisions themselves, to take away all of these layers of management and checking in, and potentially extra paperwork and extra sort of reporting structures. So that's a really interesting one. And then you have this holacratic idea where people work in bubbles and they support each other. And then you've got the flatarchy. So that's a slightly different version. And then the one that I quite like is really not on this page, but if you take the hierarchical and flip it the other way around. So that's a concept called servant leadership. And that would be where the leader of the organization doesn't sit at the top telling people what to do. Instead, they sit at the bottom and they say, how can I serve you? How can I help you? How can I make sure that you're able to deliver the thing that I've brought you in to do? So just a starting point, really. But thinking about your comms team and then where that sits within the wider organization, it's really good just to understand what the structure is, and also depending on your role, if you're able to get into the boardroom and make recommendations, sometimes it's a really good exercise to look at is, do you have the structure that you want to have, and do you have a structure that's built for the future and true to your values? So there's quite a lot of restructuring happening at the moment for various reasons in the world. But I think we're going to see a lot more of these sort of flat or holacratic organizational structures. This is an obvious one, but diversity is key. And I would say, if not in the communications team, then, that's the most important place to have that diversity, is the leadership team and the communications team, and then across the entire organization. But diversity is so important. And the biggest benefit of having that diversity is the breadth of ideas and the breadth of scope of understanding. So I would really encourage you to look at diversity in your teams and also in your recruitment. And then one of the other questions that we posed earlier was around, what kind of resource do you have and what resource do you need? So on the left, you've got agencies, so potentially quite easy to switch on and off. There's kind of two approaches you could take. Well, there's lots of approaches, but you could outsource everything to an agency, or you might decide that you want to give agencies projects. So a big challenge that we find in-house teams can face is that they feel a little bit like they are firefighting, and they'd love to do the big stuff, but they get caught up in the day-to-day. So using an agency might be able to help you just to amplify what you do by giving an agency that big, exciting, kind of cool brand stuff that makes a big change and moves the dial. And then your limited in-house resource is used to manage what we would call business as usual. Now, if I was the in-house person, my kind of preference of working is doing the cool stuff. So you've also got the flip side of that, is maybe you're going to do the big stuff and you're going to give the agency the kind of easy to hand over, day-to-day incremental work. Obviously, you've got challenges there potentially around integration, particularly for firefighting, but that's another approach. And then I think something we're seeing increasingly, and that we're really keen to do more of with our clients, is this hybrid approach, where rather than breaking it into campaigns and business as usual, we look at, within the agency team and the in-house team, who's going to do what, and how are we going to collectively take this project forward. So it's a consultative approach, and I think it sounds cheesy when you pitch to people and you say, we want to be part of your team, but genuinely it is integrating the agency into the in-house team and vice versa. And if you get the right agency partner, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for some skill transfer as well. And hopefully in this day and age, agencies are really happy, you know, as we've been doing our CommsCamp series, happy to kind of share our tricks and our tools and just work with the client so that we get the best outcome, rather than being really protective and trying to keep our kind of ways of working behind the scenes. So when you go back into thinking about resource and capacity, it's worth taking some different approaches and trying some different models to think about how you could deliver everything you need, and whether it's agency, in-house, or some sort of hybrid model maybe. So we've touched on organization, but what we really want to focus on a lot today is team, and how do you as a person in a team, whether you're managing the team, whether you're part of the team, how can you be your best work self really, and how can you make sure that you have everything you need to be able to deliver a great job? So first of all, and it is quite long, but it's worth it, so stick with it. This is an amazing video, and the title of it is "Watch This Film Every Day" for a reason, because I think everybody needs a bit of a pick-me-up sometimes and a bit of motivation. And I love this film because it really just tells you that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve, and you know, don't accept the norms. Do challenge yourself and push yourself forwards. So we'll watch this.
I found that nothing in life is worthwhile unless you take risks. Nothing. Nelson Mandela said, "There is no passion to be found playing small and settling for a life that's less than the one you're capable of living." Now, I'm sure in your experiences in school and applying to college and picking your major and deciding what you want to do with life, I'm sure people have told you to make sure you have something to fall back on. Make sure you got something to fall back on, honey. But I never understood that concept, having something to fall back on. If I'm going to fall, I don't want to fall back on anything. I want to fall forward. I figure at least this way I'll see what I'm going to hit. Without consistency, you'll never finish. So do what you feel passionate about. Take chances. Don't be afraid to fail. There's an old IQ test was 9 dots, and you had to draw 5 lines with a pencil within these 9 dots without lifting the pencil. The only way to do it was to go outside the box. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Don't be afraid to fail big, to dream big. But remember, dreams without goals are just dreams. Reggie Jackson struck out 2,600 times in his career, the most in the history of baseball. But you don't hear about the strikeouts. People remember the home runs. Fall forward. Thomas Edison conducted 1,000 failed experiments. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Because the 1,001st was the light bulb. Fall forward. Every failed experiment is one step closer to success. You've got to take risks. You got to get out there. You got to give it everything you got, whether it's your time, your talent, your prayers, or your treasures. What are you going to do with what you have? I'm not talking about how much you have. Some of you are business majors, some of you are theologians, nurses, sociologists. Some of you have money, some of you have patience, some of you have kindness, some of you have love. Some of you have the gift of long suffering, whatever it is, whatever your gift is. What are you going to do with what you have? All right, now here's my last point about failure. Sometimes it's the best way to figure out where you're going. Your life will never be a straight path. I began at Fordham University as a pre-med student. I took a course called cardiac morphogenesis. I couldn't read it, I couldn't say it, I sure couldn't pass it. So then I decided to go into pre-law, then journalism. And with no academic focus, my grades took off in their own direction. I was a 1.8 GPA, and the university very politely suggested that it might be better to take some time off. I was 20 years old, I was at my lowest point. And then one day, and I remember the exact day, March 27th, 1975, I was helping my mother in her beauty shop. My mother owned a beauty shop up in Mount Vernon. And there was this older woman who was considered one of the elders in the town. And I didn't know her personally, but I was looking in the mirror, and every time I looked at the mirror, I could see her behind me, and she was staring at me. She just kept looking at me. Every time I looked at her, she kept giving me these strange looks. So she finally took the dryer off her head and she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Young boy, I have a prophecy, a spiritual prophecy." She said, "You are going to travel the world and speak to millions of people." And in the years that followed, just as that woman prophesied, I have traveled the world and I have spoken to millions of people through my movies. Millions who up till this day couldn't see me, who up till this day I couldn't see while I was talking to them, and they couldn't see me, they could only see the movie. They couldn't see the real me. But I see you today, and I'm encouraged by what I see. And I'm strengthened by what I see. Because taking risk is not just about going for a job. It's also about knowing what you know and what you don't know. It's about being open to people and to ideas. The chances you take, the people you meet, the people you love, the faith that you have, that's what's going to define you. Never be discouraged. Never hold back. Give everything you got. And when you fall throughout life, remember this: fall forward.
So that was really inspiring. And I think Denzel Washington there, I've got it in my diary to try and watch that every day. And I do as much as I can, because it really gives me some get up and go in the morning as I look at my to-do list and think about what I'm going to prioritize for the day. We're going to move on now and talk a bit more about your role within a team. So 3 starting points here is thinking about your career plan. Where do you want to get to? And, what's the dream for you? If you had a 5-year plan, and this is like a cheesy question you get in interviews, but it's actually a really important thing to do. As much as your organization needs a comms plan, you need a career development plan. And if you don't set some milestones for yourself, then you're not going to achieve whatever your ambitions might be. And if you don't know what your ambitions are, that's okay as well. You can hopefully take some of the content today and go away and do your own research as well, and try and map out that career path for you and think about what the timeframes are and what steps do you need to take in order to get to where you want to go to. So in comms and marketing and PR, there's really 2 key routes. You can generalize or you can specialize. And I think that specializing route has opened up a lot more in recent years. I I think generalizing, you become the manager, you become the director, you become the leader. And that is a great career path for many people, but it's not the one for everybody. And again, thinking about the downfalls in organizations, often people get promoted because they are really good at their job. And that's because they're really skilled at something, not necessarily managing people. So I would have a good think, and as your career progresses, you might change your opinion of this as well. But have a good think about what level of management, direction, and leadership do you want to take. And I would say you're not held back if you don't want to be a manager, and you can still be a leader without being a manager. If you want to be the creative director within your organization, the ideas person, the visionary, then there's a huge role there for making huge impact on your teams and your organization, but maybe without being the day-to-day manager that's more of a completer finisher and makes sure that everything gets done. Equally, you could be a media relations specialist, or you could be the analytical person who maybe is the completer finisher, and you're going around maybe pairing yourself up with this visionary creative, and you just make sure everything gets done, and you make sure that the deliverables are met, and that the campaign launches on time, and that all the boxes are ticked. So later on, we're going to be talking to Shona Marshall from Connect 3, and she'll be talking about a bit more of that around people's preferences. So that's where that will fit in. So you could lead the team, or you could just get really, really skilled and really good at doing. Or it's also okay if you don't want to do those things. Some people love the job they've got and don't necessarily want to take the next step up. So that's okay as well. Don't feel pressurized. I think communications, marketing, PR, there's a huge blend of skills that are required. So thinking about this PISO model that we talk about when we cover channels, to be able to do all of these things takes incredibly different skills. The requirements for being a media relations specialist up in the earned media section, that's about getting on the phone. It's about being an extrovert and pitching to people and being creative and catching them at the right time and giving them the angle and converting people and pushing a bit as well. Whereas maybe on the other side, if you were thinking about, let's say, social media advertising, that's going to be really analytical. So if you're not doing the content, but you're doing the technical profiling of audiences and targeting people, and then analyzing the results and making adjustments, that's a very, very different role to the media relations one. And I think there is a big issue in our industry, both in agency and in-house, although hopefully specialist agencies are a bit better about specializing in their thing and not expecting somebody to be a media relations specialist and a paid advertising specialist at the same time, and appreciating those skill sets. But in general, you do still see so many job adverts where they're literally calling for somebody who's a writer, a thinker, an analytical person, reports, who's going to come up with visionary things, make sure they happen. And it's actually potentially asking a bit too much of people, and thinking to the stuff that you enjoy and how much effort you put into those outcomes. I think everybody would agree that when you're in a natural place doing something you enjoy and you feel skilled at and able to do, you're always going to get better results. So again, if you've got a team of people working into you, are you using their skills to the best you can? Or have people just kind of been siloed into roles? Or have you got levels of managers and then lots of generalists? Because specialization in many ways is definitely the future. And this really just follows that up. So these are just a few skills that are on that slide there, but there's so many others as well. And they don't necessarily fit in together, and they're not, you don't naturally find people that have all of these things at once. So training and development, I think no matter what level you get to within your industry, and I was talking to a CIPR fellow yesterday who said, you know, she still does CPD, it's so important and everybody should. I think every day is a school day for us, and we really do want to be making sure that we are learning and developing ourselves every day, and not least in communications and PR and marketing, when we know how quickly the world's changing and how much we do need to adapt. So just a few starting points of where you might want to go for training. Obviously really pleased everyone's at CommsCamp, and I'm hoping that we're serving you with some great content that will inspire you and make you go away and look into things a bit deeper than we're necessarily going in our hour-long sessions each week. And if we can, we'll think about maybe continuing this beyond the 10 weeks if there is demand there. The PRCAs, that can be a really good place to look. And the PRCA also has something called the CMS, which is the Communication Management System. Now they have an in-house one and they have an agency one. And if you're looking at auditing the communications function in your organization, we have our diagnostic, but the PRCA has a really good one as well, which is much deeper and broader and quite different to what we're doing. So I think the two can complement each other quite well. And you've got options there. You can look at it and self-evaluate yourself on it. And then also you could become a full PRCA member. And at that stage, you can go through their audit process so that you get a rubber stamp to say that you are following these processes. So it's a really good one to go and look at. The CIPR, so many people are CIPR members on the call today, I know. Personally, I'm a fellow of the CIPR and also a chartered PR practitioner, I think is what we call it. And I'd really encourage people to think about what the CIPR can give you and how you can use the CIPR to support your career development. So at a basic level, there's the annual CPD and making sure that you are doing that minimum level of training. You've then got the chartership program, which again is a really good experience. And currently as well, a lot of those are happening online, which makes it much more accessible. So chartership is definitely something to consider once you're moving up your career and you feel like you've got necessary experience to be able to take to that. And then I guess working towards a fellowship as well, potentially in the future, if that's something that you're interested in. The Marketing Society, as a PR and comms person, I find the Marketing Society content really good and really useful, and partly because I think it does just look at a slightly broader level sometimes, and it's got a really good focus on digital. So Marketing Society, definitely worth looking at as well. And you might want to think about going back to college or university, or maybe you didn't go before and you want to go away and work towards some form of qualification. I don't always think qualifications are completely necessary, and I think it's fantastic that so many places are now embracing apprenticeships rather than just graduate trainee programs. So that's definitely something to think about, though, is if you need some extra training to plug a gap, or if you feel like you want to commit to something, then looking at some of the college and university short courses or part-time courses, or taking a gap year and going back can all be really good options. And Robert Gordon in particular at the moment, and there are loads of other great courses from universities out there too, but Robert Gordon are doing some really good digital marketing content at the moment that's worth looking at. And some of that's free as well. I think the other areas that sometimes we neglect as communications people is thinking about the industry you're in and what training might be available there. So if you work for a construction firm, then is there some maybe base level training that you could do in construction so that you really get a deeper level of understanding about the organization that you work in and the sector that they're in? And I think everybody that's worked in comms and PR knows we do tend to turn our hand to anything and pick things up quite quickly. So the good chances are that if you're in a specific industry that's maybe quite complex, your comms training and just being in the comms team is going to teach you a lot about that industry, but maybe thinking about some specific training in that might be a good idea as well. And then the other one to think about is the Institute of Directors. They provide really good training around what do boards look for, what's the role of a non-executive director, how do you apply governance, some really kind of key things that can help you at a strategic level. And I'm a real firm believer that communications and reputation in particular should be on the board agenda. So if you want to move yourself into a board position, or if you just want to be in the boardroom providing those key updates on what communication is delivered in the past quarter, for example, I think having a deeper understanding of the role of the board and what the board is there for and what they're not there for as well, and really getting that difference between executives and non-executives can just be a great grounding for you to have the right conversations and pitch things at the right level. Thinking then about your CPD. So as I mentioned, the CIPR would be my kind of starting point of where I would log my CPD. And then also thinking within your organization, hopefully you have some form of one-to-ones and development plans. But if you don't, then you can create your own. And the PRCA content I mentioned earlier, their CMS has some quite good structures that you could consider for that. But I always think as a starting point, rather than thinking about, the detail of your role, if you can think about your purpose in the organization and your personal brand, again, going back to that big thinking and being aware that anything's possible, then that's going to really help you to elevate where you're trying to get to and to make a real difference as well. So have a think about your purpose and have a think about your brand. Write your name beside it. So if your name's John, what is brand John, and what do you want people to think about you? And do you have a cause or a passion or something, whether it's in your organization or whether it's, that you're volunteering in the school PTA and that you really want to achieve something incredible for them, let's say, you might want to apply it in that way. And then some other opportunities for skills development. So there's the idea of a job swap, and I think you hear about these there's great programs on TV like Back to the Floor, where you see leaders going and working on the tills in the supermarket or whatever, and really valid jobs, but they get that deeper understanding. So if you work for a big organization, then think about whether you've got the depth of knowledge that you need and whether you really understand what it might be like for some of the frontline staff day to day. And also we're storytellers. So if you can go out into the company at a much deeper level, you're going to find those rich stories much more easily. And then you could also think about different types of job swaps. So if you work with an agency, would they consider giving you some kind of work experience and maybe showing you some of the work that they're doing for other brands, or having you come into the office and hot desk with them if we get back to a point where we're allowed to go to offices regularly. You've also got suppliers. Can they give you some training or some work experience? Do you have key partners that maybe know something in depth about something you need to know? And then going back to what I was saying about the Institute of Directors and thinking about boards and strategy, are there maybe a board role in your community of something that you are passionate about? Are you a big cyclist? Then can you get behind a cycling charity? And whether it's volunteering, doing their communications, or whether it's trying to get onto their board or their advisors group and give something back. And at the same time, you're also going to learn a lot as well. So now I'm really excited to speak to Shona Marshall from Connect 3. And Shona is a specialist in the insights profiling. So we're going to talk a little bit about, as a high performance team, how can understanding insights about those in the team really help us to achieve big things. Hi, Shona. It would be great if you could introduce yourself to everybody.
Thank you. So, Shona Marshall, I am Client Development Director and Associate Consultant with an organisation called Connect 3. So yeah, I guess that's what I do. Who I am is I just love anything to do with enabling people to be the best versions of themselves. So that's me. Fantastic. In my lovely study with my map of the world of places I used to go to.
Shona, you were going to tell us first of all about the pillars that you identified within a team.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this whole thing about teamwork. We've all experienced working in different teams, and we know that they can be hotbeds of personality clashes, of misunderstandings, and of different work styles. And we know that. We've had the highs of teamwork and the lows of teamwork. I'm sure everybody on this has experienced that. But fundamentally, all teams require, I would say, 4 things, which is a focus on process, a focus on focus, climate, and flow. And each of us have a unique perspective on how important they are for us as individuals. But the combination of that is really important for a high-performing team. Because if you think about it from a process point of view, people want to know not just the what about the team, but also the how. How is this working from a people process point of view and a people engagement side of it, other than just a operational side of it? And what level of clarity do people have about that norm within the team? Is there the right blend of skills, both from a professional point of view and also the ability to sort of gel personally? So I think that process thing is really important as the first pillar. Second pillar, I would say, is around about the focus. So that's is there a shared purpose for the team? Does every team member share it? Is there a purpose that drives accountability, that makes people want to get stuff done, and a desire then to deliver? There's got to be that shared focus. So that's really important. You've then got that climate, I would say, is the third pillar. You know, and all of us, I guess, could do a weather report on our teams. I used to have a boss where you went in and you were like, what's the weather like today? And it was like, bit stormy, or sun shining today. You were like, all right, I'll go in and ask the question. And the more variable that climate is within a team, the more challenging it is for them to be a highly performing team and a highly effective team. And then the last bit is what I would call flow. And I guess I would say, you know when you're in the flow when you know it, which seems a really strange thing to say, but it's just like what they say about being in love. If you've ever been in love and you go, I don't know if I have, then you probably haven't been. So that's what I mean by flow. You'll remember it when you've been in the flow of a great team. It's been exhilarating, it's been exciting, and you've achieved things that you never thought were possible just because it's there. There's something, the magic has happened. So those would be the 4 pillars for me of a high performing team.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. And I think that leads you into, I know that you're an accredited insights practitioner, and that you can kind of map those pillars against the insights profiling. So it would be great to hear a bit about the work that you do with insights and how people can use that.
Yeah, I mean, insights, there are loads of diagnostics and psychometrics out there, but I think insights is a really, really accessible one for people being able to go, right, where do I fit into this team? Where is my place for that? Because as I went through process and focus and climate and flow there, people have gone, oh yeah, that's really important. Oh, that's important too. But you'd have what we call a preference for one over the other. And if we look at that word preference, and a bit of audience interaction here, if you just fold your arms and do it that way. Right, now if I ask you, fold your arms a different way, fold your arms the opposite way. That feels different. Yeah, that's what we mean by preference. If you think about it in terms of getting dressed in the morning, do you have a preference to put your bra on before your knickers on before your bra? It's not that you can or you can't do it. It is purely that preference has become more of a learnt behaviour that fits nicer, that it's more natural. It's just the way that you do it. It feels more comfortable and it's more you than anything else. And I think this is where the real preferences come in, and then we can layer the preferences into these 4 colour energies that we use in Insights, which are just accessible for everybody. And while you can then take 4 colours into 72 types, 4 colours is enough just to start making some of those of, that's where I fit in, and that's what's really important to me. So yeah, I don't know if we want to try and get some thoughts around preferences and where they might fit in with the colours. Would that be useful?
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that.
Alrighty, let's give it a bash. This is the L'Oreal. Now's the time that we get a bit technical. So we need to imagine a circle here, right? So on the left-hand side of this circle, you've got what I would call introversion. On the right-hand side of the circle, you've got extroversion. And just very briefly, it's not that stereotype of introverts and extroverts. This is about, where do you get your energy from? Yeah, what do you do to recharge your batteries at the end of the day? Do you chat with friends, or are you more inclined to get a book and just have that quiet time? Yeah, do you more think before you speak, or do you more speak before you think? Where's your sort of preference from it? So that's a very brief summary of the I and the E from an introversion and extroversion point of view. And then we've got the preference between thinking and feeling. So the thinking preference is up at the top of the circle, and the feeling preference is down at the bottom. And that's really about that making decisions, that head and heart debate, yeah, that we often have. Do you think about the task and the process, or is it about the people first? So where is that focus for you? More about the task or more about the people? And it's not to say that you don't do both, but you will go to one first before you go to the other. Sometimes that can cause a lot of us internal challenges, because we're like, head, heart, what am I doing? So those, if you like, left, right, top, bottom, as very, very basics of Insights. So if you've got that, and we stick with those 4, what you then have, take out my colour blocks, we do like our blocks with Insights, is if you were introversion and thinking as a preference, then we would say that you're more of a blue energy, and that's our cool blue. And that would mean that you have got more on a good day. And let's just talk about good days for today, because we all need good days. So on a good day, somebody with a blue dominant colour energy will be cautious, will be precise, will be deliberate, will be questioning, will probably be quite formal, and they want others to be interested in the detail in the same way that they're interested in the detail. So that's what the cool blues want. So they very much relate to that process part of the team that we spoke about. Then on the other bottom left-hand corner, if you like, of the Insights wheel is the greens. So the earth greens have got that preference for introversion, but the preference for feeling as well. So they're very much about, as it says on my block here, show me that you care. They want people to care about people as much as they care about people. They're the ones who naturally have a preference for encouraging, sharing with others, being that real inclusive feel and that empathy side of it. Yeah, so we've seen a lot of green being dialed up, as we would call it, in the current situation that we've been. So that's the left hand side of the wheel between the blue and the green. Then over on our right hand side of the wheel, we have the extroversion preference. So if you've got an extroversion preference and also then a thinking preference, we call those people our fiery reds. Okay, so their phrase that we have on the block is be bright, be brief, be gone. Yeah, they are focusing very much on the focus, the purpose.
I'm laughing, Shona, because as we're aware, you've done some profiling with me, and I'm the red.
Bright, be brief, be gone. I'm being as brief as I can there. Yeah. So, you know, they are the ones who are demanding. They are strong-willed. They are purposeful. They've got that competitive edge of just let's get stuff done. Yeah. So that's where you're sitting. We've then got on the other side, down in this corner, our yellows. They're looking at the flow. We call them our sunshine yellows. So they're extroverted, but they've got that people focus about them. So they're the ones.
As well.
What's that?
And I do have some of that as well.
And that's what we're saying as well. And thank you. It's about, we all have different pots of paint, as I call them, in these. We're not one colour and one colour only. It is that unique blend of all four that makes us who we are and makes our contribution to the team. So the sunshine yellows are those ones who are sociable and dynamic and demonstrative and persuasive and enthusiastic and all of those things. So I guess that's the summary of the four colours. And what you then have, and where Insights is fantastic in terms of helping people explore that team dynamic, is where do these complement each other within the team? And where then is the clash in terms of the communication? When a blue's communicating with a red, that's going to cause some problems. When a red's communicating with a green, that might have some challenges. So where's that perspective coming in and appreciation for what everybody's trying to bring to the whole team, so that you make the most of all the colour energies that you have in your team?
Fantastic. Thank you, Shona. So we're all about actionable stuff that people can take away tomorrow and use in their organizations. If people wanted to find out more about Insights, what would be a good starting point for them?
More than happy to speak to anybody about it. I mean, obviously my passion for Insights and helping people give that level of self-awareness has probably not come through. I'll let you guess what my colour energies are. But yeah, they can contact me, either look me up on LinkedIn, I'm on there just as Shona Marshall, or email address is probably easiest. Is it Shona at connect3.co.uk, and we'd be more than happy to explore any of that with people that think it might add value to becoming a high-performing communications team.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Shona. That was really interesting. Lots to think about, particularly around how we deal with our colleagues and how we make sure that we're working as one team and everyone's getting on well.
Excellent. Might also help you deal with your stakeholders as well.
Definitely. Yes. Lots of ideas there. And stakeholders is another area of our communications wheel. So super. Thank you very much.
Pleasure as always. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was fantastic. I really enjoyed speaking to Shona and hearing her thoughts. And certainly for myself, I've been really thinking quite a lot since another discussion I've had with Shona about my personal Insights profile and where I kind of sit and what my natural traits might be. I'm going to share now another kind of inspirational case study, and it's actually a Muckle Media project. It's something that we worked on a few years ago. It's definitely up there with some of my career highlights in terms of getting behind an incredible project and bringing it to life and doing that storytelling. It's Mark Beaumont, and he came to us just before he was about to cycle around the world in 80 days. And I think there's really two takeaways from this. The first one being Mark's approach to this. So he didn't want to get an incremental gain. He didn't want to be, one day faster than the world record holder. He wanted to go out there and set something incredible. And I think secondly, he's a really good storyteller. So Mark's approach was choosing the 80 days so that he could take the Phileas Fogg story and create a new version of that. So really interesting case study, and here are some of the results we got from Mark.
I've just arrived in Home Restaurant right in the heart of Edinburgh, supporting Social Bite and their incredible work throughout Scotland. But the whole purpose is a big thank you, Dana, with the Muckle Media team. These guys have worked with me incredibly hard over the last year and a half for the Around the World in 80 Days mission. What a story, what a global story. And tonight there's a great buzz in the background with loads of guest friends and whatnot, coming to hear the story and find out how we took this simple idea, can you get around the planet in 80 days, to a global audience. When I first got in touch with Mako Media, it was quite close to my launch date. The idea was really about keeping this under wraps until the 11th hour and then create as much earned media value as possible. So we started day one, going live to the world. Can you get around the world in 80 days? The first human-powered circumnavigation in 80 days with a story. I was setting out around Britain, 3,000 miles, a training ride on home soil to test me, test my team, but more overly, to create a real publicity stunt, something which people could get their head around, understand the scale of the ambition. 240 miles a day, 69, because it was on home soil, it got the local press engaged, it certainly captured the national press, and it gave us content from day one. From that day through to the finish of the 80 days was about 200 days of real-time storytelling. So we did around Britain, there was 9 weeks recovery for me, keeping the story going, and then from Paris back to Paris, 18,000 miles. And the guys at Mako Media worked incredibly hard to keep that story fresh, even though there was a real routine to the actual process on the road, making sure we shifted the focus, from the excitement of the start, the grit of the middle, some milestones like the 1 month record, the most miles ever cycled in a month, taking it to different audiences like Blue Peter, tons of schools around the country as well. So capturing everything from the national press, doing I think 5 hits on BBC Breakfast. I think we had 5 feature articles in the FT, places where you wouldn't imagine adventure cycling to end up. So our dream, our ambition was to take this story not just to the niche sport cycling press, but go big, go broad, capture everything from 7-year-olds to 70-year-olds from right here in Scotland to around the world. And we did that. I mean, massive earned media value. Our other dream, which I shared the first time I met with Natalie and Ellie and the team, was can we get to the finishing line in Paris with all the sponsors absolutely delighted with all the coverage? Anything that comes afterwards, the documentary, the book, the talk tour, is simply the icing on the cake, as opposed to the olden days where it was about, packaging everything up nicely and telling the story afterwards. This was about taking an audience along on the journey, and that's what the guys at Mako Media did for me.
So just to wrap up then on our capacity session today, where we've really talked about budgeting briefly, we've talked about organisational structure, and then we've focused mainly in today on trying to inspire you to think about your purpose, to think about your role, and to understand that actually anything is possible in theory, within reason probably. So just to check in again, want to just cover a couple of things. We do have a survey and we'd love to hear how you are getting on with our content. We've got regular emails going out, want to make sure everybody's receiving those. We're putting our slides onto SlideShare if you want a slide, but you can always watch back the full video content as well. We've got the diagnostic and we have worksheets each week that you can have a look at. We also have the Facebook group, and next week we will be talking about stakeholders. So if you have a moment, do engage with all of those channels. If you're not receiving any of that, let us know on this email address. But that's us for this week, and really look forward to seeing you next